Hello, everybody. My name is Sam. I go by Moppski online, and it has been a long time since I've made a video on anything. So I thought today what I want to do is kind of just go over the last year and kind of what's went on with me in the last year and how my year lined up with the resolutions that I had and how things turned out. The reason I usually put out a post on Facebook and other websites at the end of the year kind of recapping. But this year, so much has happened. And, I'm planning on titling this The Hardest Year of My Life. And that's really not an exaggeration. But part of it was my own doing. So I kind of wanted to talk about that, see how things have changed in my life over the last year, and kind of go from there. If you guys have any questions for me, or if I didn't make something clear, let me know, and I will do my best to rectify that. So, 2021. So for the past 4 years, almost 5, I have made a really big deal on setting resolutions for myself. That basically means when I go to make those resolutions, I think about what do I want to improve in my life. And I know that most people do that, and it can mold into, everyone knows the stereotype of you can go to the gym or get your finances in order or go on more vacations and things like that. And I mean, everybody does those. And there's nothing wrong with those resolutions. But what I've found in the time that I've been making a big deal of making resolutions, it is very difficult if you set specific goals like that to achieve them, at least for me. And we'll kind of get into why that is for me and this past year. So this last year, 2021, my goals were 2 simple things. I wanted to, essentially, as you would, if you wanted to look at a star in the sky, you would move your telescope towards what you were looking at. So I wanted to do that for both my career and relationships, which 2 are things that I've really struggled with in the past. I wanted to set up a situation where I could look at where I'm at now, where I want to be, and start making the hard moves to make going in that direction. We're going to start today's discussion with work, move on to relationships, and some other things that I did that really led into what changed for my life. So we're going to start with my working situation in 2021. So I started 2021 at a job that I really can't talk about. I can tell you that I worked contracting for the military, and that's about it. But what I can tell you about it is it was manufacturing, and it was very easy work as far as manufacturing goes. It was a fairly clean factory. But it was incredibly boring for me. I'm definitely somebody who likes to have my brain and my body challenged at work. Like it's something that I look for when I'm looking at a job. And I don't really think that either of those things were happening for me. It was a very good conduit for the last 2 years for me getting back on my feet from some other life situations that were going on. And it made things easier for that time. But as I got into 2021, I realized how comfortable it had been. How much I really disliked it, but wasn't owning up to the fact that I disliked it. So I made a couple of changes early on in the year that I was really proud of. So I started going to the on-site gym there at the beginning of the year. The job started at 5:30 in the morning, and I was waking up at 3:30 every morning to go to the gym for an hour before I got to work. So I would wake up at 3:30, get there at 4, get ready for the gym at 4:30, and then I would be at work at 5:30. It was an incredibly grueling process, but I did it for almost 4 months straight, and it really, really helped. I dropped 14 pounds by the time I left that job in April. It was a difficult job mentally because I knew I wasn't where I needed to be, and they were also asking for more time from me. So I was working a ton of overtime. I was working like 50 hours a week by the time I left, and they were starting to ask more and more, and I really didn't want to dedicate that much time to work. Something I want to talk about kind of here with the work section is how looking for jobs in 2021 was. As you guys probably know, we in the U.S. have been having a huge problem trying to get people into work, either from poor working conditions, poor pay, or people fed up with the bad situations in work. And I was definitely a victim of that in certain ways. Certainly, I was not the worst that I've ever seen. I've been keeping up with the hashtag anti-work scene and things like that. I'm definitely not the worst case, but there were situations where I realized that I was being gaslit by my job. Or jobs that I was at. I was being held to standards that I didn't personally agree with when it comes to a working environment, and how much I had dedicated myself to certain positions in ways that they didn't deserve that dedication. When I was working there, it was a situation where there was mandatory overtime, and that was not something that I agreed with. I am not somebody that likes to do a whole lot of overtime. I have so many personal projects that I'm doing, both personal and my own work that I do outside of a primary income job, like a day job essentially. I have other things that I want to do, so they were asking way too much time out of me when I had those personal projects that were going on. So that was one of the things that I really wanted to get away from when I was leaving there. When it comes to people in 2021 leaving a lot of their jobs for those reasons, I completely support them in what they're doing for the most part. Obviously, I've met plenty of people in the workplace that do it just to be lazy or get a new position or take advantage of the system. And I don't necessarily agree with that, but I know a lot of really hardworking people who are being taken advantage of by a system that is just really not fair for them in a job that doesn't pay them enough. I did what most people did this year. I didn't do it for the same reasons as everybody else, and I didn't really even know it was happening until the end of the year when I had found something that I really liked. It did kind of hit for me, like the movement did kind of hit. So I decided in March of this year to do a couple different things. First of all, I started my own business. I started a photography business that I'd been thinking about for years. Photography is one of the things that I have really loved for a long time. I've been doing it for almost 7 years now, and something that was really passionate for me and something I'm very good at. And I wanted to take a different approach to it, so that's why I decided to go ahead and get into the workforce of it. So I started my own company in March. I also started thinking in my head about jobs that I was really passionate about, or things that I've wanted to try for so long and I never got the time or the point to. And what I came up with was bartending. It's something that I've thought about on multiple occasions. I'm a pretty social person. I work well in social situations, but I had never really tried it because of all the barriers that come into it. A situation where one of the companies that I did want to work for had a spot open, and I had a pretty good backdoor into the company. Now, a backdoor is a really weird way to put that, but I had a pretty good guarantee that I was going to get the job. So I decided to go ahead and go for it. This was a bar and restaurant. They serve farm-to-fresh foods from all sorts of the surrounding states where I live. I live in Indiana, so they did like Michigan and Kentucky and Illinois, and they tried to get as much of their product from those areas as possible. And they were very sustainable, and that's something that I was passionate about because of the volunteer work that I had started at the animal sanctuary. And so conservation and the systems that go into conservation was something that I was incredibly passionate about at that time, and I still am, but that has taken a backseat to some of the other projects that I've been working on. But going into a place like that was something really important to me. April of this year, when I left the job that I started this year with and went full-time into another job and working at the bar, was one of the hardest months that I've ever had. I was working 80 to 90 hours a week between my own business, a bartending job that would go mostly second shift, like from 3 to 10, and then I had a day job at the place that I'll talk about soon. It was incredibly difficult, and I didn't realize the tax that it was taking on my body and mental stress at the time. I went full balls to the wall hard into this idea that I had of pushing my career forward, and I didn't realize the strain that it was going to have on me. Like I said, I'm not somebody that really likes dedicating all my time to somebody else, to somebody else's work. Not that that's a bad thing if that's what you want to do, but me, I have enough drive in my own personal time that it makes it difficult to fill all of that time with work, and I didn't realize that that was taking as much a strain on me. By the end of April, I was incredibly depressed. I was anxious all the time. I had no time to hang out with my friends. I was putting a lot of things off that really, really mattered to me. It really it took an impact for me for the next 2 months after that happened. So about the same time that I started at the bar, maybe a month afterwards, I started at a fencing company. I'm trying not to use company names in here too much because I don't want to throw anybody on blast, because there are still people that I really enjoy in those places and that I really like, and I don't want to say that this is absolutely their experience as well. This is my personal experience with it. So I started at a fencing company with a couple things in mind. I wanted to one, maintain the activeness that I had built up at the place that I worked before, at the factory. Because I was going to the gym, I was very active. I had lost 14 pounds and I was getting onwards of 15 to 20 pounds at that point, and I wanted to maintain that activeness. Another thing that was really important to me is the factory that I worked in, it had no skills, at least on the floor of the factory, like at the assembly part of it, had no skills that you could go ahead and take into the next job. Not that you didn't learn things about the company or the business or anything like that, and not that you couldn't work yourself up to different positions, but where I was at, I wasn't learning anything that I could definitely say I can stay in this career field moving forward. So I was focusing more once I left on getting into jobs that, even if this company wasn't where I wanted to stay, the skills and the tools that I learn here could be actively taken into the next place. And I do believe that that had something to do with the job that I landed at today. So I started at this fencing company, and I wanted to learn as much as possible. I stayed there for about 3 to 4 months, and to my own point, I did learn a whole bunch. With fencing, and not the fencing with the sword type, although that would have been fun. Fencing as in putting up actual fences. There was a lot to learn. There was a lot of systems of it, and learning how it works, and how someone goes about the process, the tools that were involved, learning different power tools that I had never used before. That was really something that I was excited to learn, and I did learn a lot of those things. What kind of happened with the fencing company is ultimately, at the end of the day, part of it came down to this year. 2021 in Indiana was a very rainy year, and there were a lot of days that we had off. I wasn't making enough steady income that I could sustainably work there. Another one was some of the people that I worked with, I wasn't a really huge fan of. Not to say that it was anything of a detriment. I've definitely worked jobs, but it was kind of a culture shock going from where I've only worked for the past 7 to 8 years up to that point, and even now I'm going on my 9th year of being in the workforce. It was difficult going into a small business and seeing how varied small businesses can be. Each one runs differently. Each one has a different system, and they do things differently. Not that that's a bad thing, and they definitely work, but it doesn't work for everybody. I do prefer working for small businesses now, I will say, for sure. But it does take some time, if that's something that you want to get into, to learn the systems of those businesses and be ready to stand on your own 2 feet and stand for yourself. It came down to really those two factors at the end of the day. I did a lot of different types of work that I really enjoyed. I'm not the most, while I was staying physical, I'm not the biggest guy, so it definitely was some hard work for me. I couldn't lift the most. I couldn't hold the most posts or put the most posts in. I got tired easily than ever, but some of the other people that work there. And so the personal stress of not being able to bring myself up to the levels that they were, it did weigh on me a little bit, like the anxiety of not functioning as well as somebody else. But ultimately, to my benefit, I was very, very good at finding a place where I fit. And I have always been good at that, and I used that to my benefit this year especially. So I did find places where I fit into that system, and even to this day I could put up a fence for you. I really could. I think I have the system down, and I learned enough that I could still do that, and that was one of the points of being there. Another thing about it is I also think that there is absolutely nothing wrong with, once you have learned what you want to learn, move on to the next thing. And I felt like I had reached that point. I had also quit the bar at this point, and I want to talk a little bit about why I did that. At the time, I've learned some things in the meantime that have solidified my decision of leaving. But at the time, the real big changes for me, like the big things that I wanted to do there, really didn't fit into the lifestyle that I had. It was a lot of work. It really was. And it was a lot of mental strains. And for some of the mental health issues that I was going through at the time, I was learning some things about myself in this new system, working for smaller businesses, working a lot of hours, starting my own business, having a lot of personal projects. That was really, all those things were really important to me, but I was also learning things about myself that I had kind of put off for a couple years. All of those stresses going into it, my boss pulled me aside one day and said, just so you know, this is only about 75% of how busy it gets here. And it was a very, very busy night, and I was running around everywhere, and I was at my end. Like I was stressed to the point where I could not take it anymore. I told him directly right there, I was like, I gave you my 100% today, and I do not think I could give you any more. And it was kind of at that moment that I decided to quit. I really liked the idea of bartending, but I didn't realize the process of bartending. And I don't think it's something that I will ever go into again. The thing that I'm really proud of myself was I pushed myself to get that license and get all of the right tools that I needed, and I learned the system very well, but I don't think it fit into my life. And I was also too busy. I was really busy through the whole month of April, and I decided one of these jobs has to go, and that was the one I was making the least at. And sometimes you do have to make hard decisions like that for yourself. So after I left the fencing company, I did a week with DoorDash. So I should rewind a little bit and say that I'd been doing DoorDash as a part-time, sometimes sort of thing, like if I didn't have much I was doing since the start of this year, since January of 2021. It was fun for that, and I decided I wanted to give it a try as a full-time job. And this is kind of talking about the gig economy in general. So not just DoorDash. You know, we have Walmart delivery, we have Uber Eats, we have Postmates, and all of those sorts of things in this new gig economy. Was a term that's been around for a long time, but now it applies to something that a lot of people can do as a full-time job. And I do think that you can make DoorDash a full-time job, but there are parameters to that. I did not do enough prep when I started DoorDash. I think I would have really enjoyed it if I had done the prep work to do it. First of all, my car doesn't get enough gas mileage to make sense for some of the bigger cities. DoorDash sometimes will require you to drive 10 to 15 miles to make a delivery that might make you $5 to $7. And that really is not enough. To me, when you look at the wear and tear on vehicle, the gas prices, it didn't make sense to me to continue doing that. The other thing I didn't expect was how to budget your time. When you work for yourself on that like 1099 basis, gig economy, like you set your own hours and that sort of thing. The thing I did not expect was how hard you have to decide to maintain your own schedule. When I started it, and like I said, I only did it for about a week. When I started it, I worked 60 hours in 5 days. And that was a lot, and that was crazy for the time that I was putting in. But I didn't realize how easy it is to just eat up all of those. You know, you get like a $1 bonus per order in this one area, and so you will drive 30 minutes out from where you are to go sit in a parking lot there waiting for orders to come in, and how scary that is once you get there, and then sometimes the orders don't come in, and you don't make enough money to justify that for yourself, and how close you are playing it. It just didn't make sense for me, and I knew right away within those 5 days that I was not ready. Like I knew I was not ready to make the decision to go there. And so I landed where I'm at now. Right now, I work in a machine shop. And that sounds like, why would you go from working in a factory to a machine shop? They sound very similar. So the reason I chose this machine shop partially is because I have a lot of friends that work there. That was something that I really missed. I hadn't really had that since when I worked at Walmart. The last time I did that was in 2018. Having friends that work with you is really nice, to have people to banter off of, to have people to go to if you have issues with how you're working. And that was something that I was really missing. Another reason I decided to go here is because it's not just a machine shop with specific tooling and like CNC machines and stuff like that. This was a machine shop that completely rebuilds car engines. Engines of any kind, really, but we deal with cars for the most part. And cars is something that I've wanted to learn for a while. It's not something I'm personally super interested in, but it's something that I feel like is important to learn, and how an engine works, and how a combustion engine works, and how all the pieces inside of it work together to make the system run. And I've wanted to learn that for a long time, and I know that there's a lot of knowledge to be had there. And so looking at the system there, my boss right now taught for a community college in engineering and mechanics for 35 years. So having a good teacher and a system in place that they've been there for 50, 60 years, having that system in place where they know how to teach somebody was really important to me. And I took a pay cut for those reasons. I thought that was really important. And I was right. At this point where I'm at right now, I still think I was right to make that decision. I learned so much there at that job, I learned from my bosses. I learned from everybody else around me, learned how this system works. Another reason why I chose this company is because I knew that they would be more understanding to the mental health issues that I had going on, and I was seeking out therapy. So they were really kind with my therapy schedule. They've been working with me the whole time, and I continue to maintain it. They have given me no struggles with it. There have been days where I just needed a mental health break, and they have had no issues with me having those. They're really generous with time off. They make sure that they take care of you from a financial level as well, especially once you've established yourself there. And that is really important to me. Having a company that looks after you as much as you look after it with the effort that you put in is something that is really lacking in the workforce now. And I think finding that is really rare, and I'm very lucky to have found it. So I'm pretty happy with where I'm at now. You know, starting a business, I'll talk a little bit more at the end, but that was something else I did in the career-wise, and I did not realize the struggle that was going to be. There's very few resources for you out there, especially if you want to start it yourself. So it's difficult, and like I said, I'll talk about that in a little bit. I do want to talk about, before I go into the next topic, is the mental health struggles that I'm going on. I have no problem sharing them. It's not like a big reveal for me. It was at the time, but I feel like my talking about it can help somebody else with it. So this year I found out I have ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder. I've always had trouble focusing on things, holding focus. My mind works very quickly. I really can't get it to stop ever, and it got really, really bad this year, especially in April when things started to get really, really busy. My mind was going so fast, I couldn't slow it down. I couldn't hold focus on many things. I'm not a very efficient person because I can't hold focus on things to build any sort of efficiency. So that's really struggled when I was in the restaurant business this year. You know, a lot of the anxiety that I have comes from how fast my brain is moving. And so I started going to therapy in January, and I had to switch therapists, unfortunately, through this year, although my new therapist is great as well. You know, I started to dig into some of those symptoms and dig into the things, and I started learning about ADHD in the middle of this year, and I was like, that sounds a lot like me. And I decided to ask my current therapist about it, and we went through the whole system, and we found out, yeah, you show a lot of the signs that show with ADHD. So one of my big pushes into this next year is really getting medication and getting that sort of thing on a good track, like a sustainable track, is something I really want to work on this year. So another thing that I was focusing on this year, the other really big goal that I had, was I also wanted to align myself more towards relationships. Relationships in the past have been very difficult for me. Since I was raised in a church environment, and I didn't really have a lot of dating experience from watching people or even my own dating experience. As a kid, I came in with some really weird expectations of what a relationship was supposed to be. And I had been talking to a lot of friends at the time and trying to figure out where my expectations are not being met and where they need to be changed. And so aligning myself more towards a relationship, I wanted to set myself in a direction that when I found the right relationship, it would be apparent to me. Where I was at the time, I didn't think it would be apparent. So I will say right now, I did not end up with a relationship by the end of the year, but that was not really the point. It was more aligning myself towards those situations, making myself more comfortable with the situations that lead to a dating relationship, kind of setting off in that direction. There's a saying that a lot of people have when you're single. They tell you to work on bettering yourself. And to a degree, I agree with that statement. I think everyone could do with a little bit of take a step back and focus on the things that you enjoy. However, I think for anybody who has any level of mental stresses, like mental health issues, anxiety, depression, ADHD, or any attention deficit sort of disorders, I think that statement kind of sends you into a flurry. I worked on focusing on myself for 2 to 3 years after my last real big relationship. And I think that it was based on that advice of working on yourself. But at a certain point, you've kind of reached the degree that you can get to. So the Law of Diminishing Returns, if anybody is familiar with that, is that at a certain point, the higher up you get into something, the less you'll get for it for the more you put in. A really great example of this is like equipment, like PC parts. Let's put it that way. If you're not familiar with PC parts, I'm sorry for this analogy, but like the difference between a 3060 and a 3090 are relatively inconsequential. Like they don't really change that much compared to older hardware. So the idea of diminishing returns is once you get up to about 80%, or at least that's the number that I think it usually is when you're talking about equipment, when you get to about 80%, you will put more money in with less results. That's kind of what I had reached to the point of building myself, like working on myself. I've reached a point of diminishing returns where I was about 80% of where I wanted to be, but it was starting to become way harder to get past that 80%. And I felt like it is now time for me to take that and branch out a little bit, because always my issue has been confidence. The really big change this year, my last real big relationship was in 2018. It ended midway through the year. And since that point, I had really never had an issue getting dates, but I had an issue with the people that I had been going on dates with. They weren't the type of people that meshed well with me. Some of them were just straight creepy. And so I had been on a lot of first dates. I'd say even like up until the end of 2020, I had been on 30 to 40 first dates, and I had not really changed anything about the type of people that I was looking for, the people that I was attracted to. I was actively just taking whatever I could get and then realizing that it wasn't what I wanted by the time I had got on the first date. And so I decided to change the way that I did things. I would be a little bit more picky, but also making myself more known. And this really did work out for me. At least in my opinion, I see it as a win. Like I said, didn't end up with a relationship, so some people may not see it as a win. But for me, I think it is. There have been 4 different people that I went out with multiple times this year that I was really interested in, and things just kind of didn't work out. One of them I straight up just approached out of the blue, and that is so not me. Another one I had met through working at the bar. Like, again, so not me in those situations, but I was deciding to put myself out there more in a way that I really hadn't before. And I think that's to my benefit, because now when I look at those situations, I look at them with so much more confidence, knowing that I have the skills. Because when you get into those situations where you're approaching somebody in real life, or you're asking somebody to go on a date in any situations, online dating, in real life, whatever you want to say, it can be scary. It can be a situation that's not fun to deal with. But when you keep in the back of your mind that you know you have the skills, it makes those snap decisions that you have to make so much easier to make, because you know you have them. Like I said, before that, I had only been on first dates for the last 3 or 4 years. And this year, I have been on multiple situations where I went on multiple dates. And again, it didn't work out for any variety of reasons. There were multiple different situations, some of them less savory than others. And I don't really need to get into the whole beef of everything, but I have changed the type of person that I am attracted to. Like, that's the best way that I can put it. It's a situation where the people that I've been out with this year are really genuinely great people, like in their own right, in their own ways of business, or how they decide to carry themselves, have been way more in line with what I really want moving forward with my life. So another thing with the relationships that I'd really struggled with is I've had a relatively low self-esteem most of my life. Again, I attribute a lot of that to purity culture in the church. I want to work on a video again really soon about my whole journey through religion, through Christianity, and how I kind of got out of that, but that's for another time. I had carried really low self-esteem with me for a long time, and one of the really, really big changes that I made this year in my mental thinking about how a relationship can go is less of, if I go out on a date with them, it's them giving me something. And I decided to start thinking about it as, what if they want to go out with me as much as I want to go out with them? And that has changed my perspective completely. It made it so much easier to approach a situation where that may not be the case. I view it very much as an athlete views the game, right? Like when an athlete goes into a game, he thinks in his head, I'm going to win this, I'm going to win this, I'm going to win this. And I struggle with that type of mindset a lot of times, especially when I'm thinking competitively. In this particular aspect, it's helped me a ton, because when you go into a situation, you don't know what the other person is thinking, you don't know what they're going to say, it can be scary. But if you think in your head that they might be on the same level as you, it may not be the case, but you end up with so much more cower to your own mental processes. You're not at the end of the day. It makes this defense that's a lot easier to take whatever comes at you, because these situations, dating, working, all these sorts of things, can require such fast and last minute decisions and quick thinking. And having these plays, like how football is played, they have a playbook, like a book full of different positions and plays where everybody's going to line up what thing you're going to gun for. You kind of do that for yourself mentally. And so when you're presented with a situation that requires a specific play, you know how to act in that position. You have to train in anything in life. In my opinion, you have to train yourself for anything you want to do. It's not going to come to you naturally. Certain things come to you more naturally than others. Most of the time, it's not going to come to you naturally, and you need to work at it. It's like working out. When you first go, you're going to end up super sore for the first 2 or 3 weeks. It's going to suck. You're going to not want to go back. But as soon as you get past that, it becomes so much easier to just continue, because you have worked in those systems. You have built yourself up. You have some practice. I'm talking about relationships and dating, but you could apply that to a career. You could apply that to how you handle conversations. Like however you want to, just remind yourself that you need to work towards it. You can't just be good at it immediately for most of the things in your life. I do want to talk about some of the secondary goals I had for 2021. They weren't really necessary for me, but they were certain things that I wanted to keep in the back of my head for something that could be an option. And one of those was working out, in more of a health-related focus. At the beginning of this year, I weighed 195 pounds. It's not the biggest I've ever been, but it was definitely on the bigger end. I had become lazy. 2020 was a really hard year for everybody. I'm sure everybody gained some weight then, but I was really dedicated at the beginning of this year. I really want to drop it down to a point where I feel more functional. And I began to work out, and it was really, really difficult to start with. And I don't currently go to the gym now, but the thing that I'm really proud of myself was I realized that I really don't have any motivation at the end of the day when I'm working where I want to go to a gym. So I decided the jobs that I'm going to be looking for, I'm going to be looking for something that keeps me active. The fencing company kept me working out as much as I did when I worked at the factory earlier this year and they had an on-site gym. I worked as much, if not more. I was doing a ton of lifting. And the job that I have now, I still do a lot of lifting. Like it's a lot of physical work. Some of the parts that I work with can be anywhere from 80 to 400 pounds. Obviously, I don't lift the 400-pound ones, but you get what I mean. But finding those active jobs and things that incorporating getting physical activity into the work that I do was something that was able to maintain the weight. Like I said, I lost 14 pounds by April. I am now down almost 30 pounds. I weighed 195 at the beginning of this year, and I currently weigh about 168. Realizing your strengths and your weaknesses and then working around those things, it really was something that I worked towards, and I think it worked out pretty well. So starting a business was a huge one. I will just tell you, anybody right now that wants to start a business, do not think that you have to get an LLC right off the bat, because it is a grueling process. You will never know if you've done it right. To this day, I cannot tell you whether I got it right or not. There is a lot that goes into it that you don't realize before you start an LLC. And the reason I wanted to start an LLC partially was to motivate myself. Hey, I have an actual business now. The government views this as a business. That was motivation for me. But also, I wanted that legal protection, especially since I decided to become a photographer. You kind of need a bit of legal leeway between you and your business's finances. So that was kind of to protect me legally. It was very difficult. You had to sign up for so much stuff. There was way more money than I thought would go into it. It was hard, but I don't regret it. I think that it was very good for me to understand that this is going to be very difficult and I'm going to continue with it. And to this day, I still have a company. But yeah, that was just something that I wanted to do, and I got it done. I have a website. I have a company. Like, I can go out and professionally do pictures. Like, that is a huge deal for me. Another one was getting my bartender's license. Even though I don't use it now, it's still active for the next 3 years. If I decide that that's something I want to give a try again, I can always just go do that. I already have the paperwork that I need to get that done. And that's really, really important to me, to have like that piece of paper that tells me, hey, I'm good at this thing. And that is really, really cool. It's something that I'd been thinking about for a long time. My parents had bought me classes to mixology. I have a whole bunch of stuff in my house. I think it's really interesting, the idea of mixing drinks and how you make new ones. And I like alcohol just like any 20-something. I thought that that was really important to me. And having that license that says, hey, I'm good at this is really, really cool. This is always a big thing for me every year is the road trips and vacations. And I've had some really, really cool ones this year. In March, I went to North Carolina, stayed at a beautiful cabin that had a waterfall at the back. It was awesome. I absolutely love North Carolina, and I think I need to go again. I did not spend enough time there. 4 days was not enough time. The other big trip that I took this year that really sticks in my head is in June. A couple of buddies that I play Call of Duty with, we all decided to get together and do a Midwest road trip. So it was 4 guys in a minivan traveling across the Midwest. We hit 6 cities in 7 days. We went from Fort Wayne to Chicago to St. Louis to Minneapolis to the Wisconsin Dells and then to Milwaukee and then back to Fort Wayne. We had a blast. We visited so many different things. I saw the microcultures between each city and how the Midwest changes as you go into each individual state. It was just so cool to see how things change, and it's completely changed my perspective on how I live life here even. Another really cool thing is I ended up in Minneapolis on Juneteenth, the year after the George Floyd protest, and it was a really cool moment. It was somber. It was tough, but boy, oh boy, did it change my perspective on like the kindness that people have. It was just a really cool place to be. People would walk up to you out of nowhere and just ask to get to know you, and it was just neat. I loved being a part of that. I got to see this moment in history in a way that not a lot of other people had the opportunity to. I do want to talk about some influences that had on me this year, especially when I talk about these influences, most of them were mental health negative. They were really tough situations that affected me and made this year harder. But ultimately, at the end of the day, there were things that needed to happen, for some of them at least. They helped grow me once I got out of the stupor that they put me in. A lot of these things, I do have a couple positive ones in here. A lot of them, they put me into this stupor, this mental low spot for a long time, a few of them a couple months. I feel like you kind of need to go through those to process big things, at least for me. Processing these big moments was really hard. Working through them, I think, was important for me, and I feel like I'm stronger because of it, because I don't have to do it again. So I'm going to start with a positive one. I had a really good friend when I worked at the factory who changed a lot of the ways that I was thinking, like a lot of the circle, if you're familiar with like circle thought or thinking in circles or things like that, he really helped me get out of that mindset of thinking in circles and provided a different perspective. We were there, we worked right next to each other, we talked every day, and he brought a whole lot of perspectives that I didn't realize could be the way that I could think. And so having an influence outside of myself to influence myself was really important to me, and it really changed my perspective for a lot of things this year, and I thought that was really awesome of him that he would invest in me like that. One of the negative factors of this year, and it's not something that I had any sort of specific mental health issues with, but provides a stupor for everybody, I think, is that COVID maintained the rest of this year. From vague quarantines to 3 different strands going through to the resistance to getting vaccinated. It was really a mental stress for everybody, especially in this country. I did end up getting my vaccine. I got it in April as soon as I could. As soon as I knew I could sign up, I was in there in a couple days. Everyone, go get vaccinated because it is the only way that we're going to get rid of this thing. But yeah, COVID, it put a strain on everybody, and it was just kind of always that thing in the back of your head, and didn't cause any specific things for me, but it was always that thing in the back of my head. One of the big mental stresses that I had this year was I went to a wedding to somebody who means a lot to me at a place that means very little to me. And it doesn't mean very little to me because it always has, but because of the way that I left and the way that I was treated there, it really hurt me. It hurt me a lot. And so being in that place, being forced to go into that place where I had been hurt, where I had a lot of baggage that I carried from it, put a strain on me in a way that I was not expecting. I was down mentally for about 2 to 3 months after this happened. It was really, really, really tough. I don't want to go into too many details because I'll talk about it a little bit more, but it was a church, and having to go back into that place, it was bittersweet because there's a lot of people there that I still care about a lot. Obviously, yeah, there's just people that I care about a lot there. And having to go back into that situation with people that, I still feel the same about that I did when I left. Like, I still had friends there, like people that I talked to every so often. But then there were also people who have had an active negative influence on my life. Having to go into that place where they are and to interact with those people was really, really, really hard. Because for me in that situation, there was a large part of me that was like, I don't belong. I need to get out of here. And you can't leave. I don't belong. I need to get out of here. But then there was also that really, really small, tiny piece that's like, what am I doing? I belong here. And that mental struggle between yourself that you're going through in situations like that is really hard. And just remember to give yourself time. I took as much time as I needed, and I feel like it was too much, but it absolutely was not. It was just enough. And then starting a business was both a really positive thing for me. Like I've talked a little bit about this before, so I don't want to go into it too much, but just the negative stress of going through all that. I did it wrong. I did it wrong the first time. I wish I would have done it differently, but I'm still going to maintain it in the situation that I have. And I really hope that it's going to grow out further. I hope that it will continue forward. So that's pretty much it. What do I want to do in 2022? What are my goals for this year? What are my New Year's resolutions? At the end of the day, my New Year's resolutions are pretty straightforward, and I leave them vague on purpose. The thing I always say is if you leave them vague, you can translate anything you do into getting your resolutions done. I really want to find a level of stability. Last year was crazy, as you can tell from all of these stories. I want to find a level of stability that I can kind of build off of. I want to find stable housing. I want to maintain a stable job, find some financial stability, and I want to have those things in place by the end of this year so that the next year I can start to make maybe a couple more risks, maybe, try a few different things. I feel like I want to take this year to kind of recover from what happened in the last year so that I can continue to try things in the year after. Another thing I want to work on is I want to build my business up. I have the groundwork for it now. And I'm going to have a full year under my belt by the time I get to March. So I want to continue to build on that. That includes marketing property. That includes really getting myself out there into different places, working with companies. And I want to network in ways that bring more people in. Photography is something that I could honestly do professionally, and I would really enjoy it. And I think I'd like to push into that. And then the last thing that I want to work on this year is just maintain confidence. I feel like I'm at a really good spot right now. I feel pretty confident with my life. I feel pretty good where I am, and I want to maintain that going into this year. There have been situations in my life that have led to that confidence draining. It goes up and down, especially when you have things like ADHD and anxiety. It makes it really hard to maintain any sort of feeling. So I really want to focus on maintaining that confidence and not letting any of the things that I worked on in 2021 slump in 2022. I want to build on top of those things instead of crushing them down. So I think that's about it. If you guys watched to the entire end of this thing, you are a baller. Thank you for watching. I haven't made a video in a while, and I really thought it would be kind of fun to do it. So here we are at the end of it. So I want to maintain doing videos moving forward. Kind of, maybe this is another New Year's resolution, but I want to talk more about these personal stories that I've been keeping inside for a really long time, that I feel like me telling them can help somebody else that's actively going through it. The situations I had with church, with youth groups, how I feel about religion, how I grew up, homeschooling, all those sorts of things. I kind of want to talk those things through for the people that are actively going through them or might be going through changes in their lives that lead to different sort of situations from those things. Like in the case of church, if somebody's having questions or they're going through a process of deconstruction, like I want to be there to help those people. If you guys stick around for a little while, you might be able to hear some of those, but either way, I thank you very much for watching this, and I will see you guys next time.